Good morning, everyone. This is the January 10th, 2022, if you can believe it, meeting of the Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force. Let's begin with our land acknowledgement. Before we begin, we acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional and unceded territory of the Lummi, Nooksack, Samish, and Semiahmoo people who have cared for and tended this land since time immemorial. Truth and acknowledgement are critical to building mutual respect and connection across all barriers of heritage and difference. We begin this effort to acknowledge what has been buried by honoring the truth. We pay respect to their elders, past and present. Please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us together here today. And please join us in uncovering such truths at any and all public events. So I'll call the meeting to order. Sorry, I'm just trying to get to full screen view. Thank you all for joining us this morning. We're going to start with an important topic. Barry, I'm looking, there you are. We're going to start with an important project, the County Council's Justice Project, and in particular, stage one of that needs assessment for the community. Barry, you have a presentation you want to give us?
Really more just an update on what we talked about last time. Last time that we met, I went over some of the the framework that we're putting together in developing this needs assessment process with the Stakeholder Advisory Committee. And the steering committee has been meeting to review a lot of the ideas that the council has put forward in its planning principles resolution and other documents. And we're starting to hone the agenda for the 5 to 6 meetings we're going to be having over the course of 2022. So really what I'm here today is just to kind of update you on where we are at in our planning for particularly our first meeting, which is next Thursday, January 20th at 1 p.m. And Jill, if you could share, I did send you an email so you'd have it at the top of your inbox, but I also noticed it's in the packet, but the planning process draft document is the one I kind of want to focus on.
You see that?
Yes. So what we've done is, and I think we explained this last time that we met, we are definitely building this plane while we're flying it, but we're making a lot of progress. What we've done is we've divided, we've taken 5 meetings and divided it into 5 topics. The first topic is basically the orientation process, just to get people on the same page of what the project's all about. The history of it, kind of where the council's thinking is, and some of those documents I mentioned earlier, just a few minutes ago, like the resolution for planning principles. And what we've done is we're going to have an overview by myself, the co-chairs of the task force, that'd be Jack and Stephen, and then other speakers will be from the administration and the prosecutor's office and the sheriff's office, to go over some of the landscape changes we've had over the past couple of years with some of the law changes. And we'll be going over some capacity issues about the jail and just a lot of, like I said, a lot of orientation. Can you scroll down, Jill? Our second meeting is going to be focused on criminal justice data. Stephen, Jack, and I and our wonderful consultants from Crossroads met with Dr. Alexis Harris last Monday to gauge her interest on being a resource for especially this piece in the data world. And we spent an hour with her, and she's very excited to help join this project. She had a few questions to clarify as far as the overall direction that we're headed with this project, and she likes that we have it on the eye of incarceration prevention and reduction is kind of the goal around what we're trying to do, and some of the reforms that we've instituted to date, like LEAD and GRACE, and how that plays into kind of our overall capacity needs. Jill, could you scroll down to number 3? This will be our behavioral health services, kind of an inventory and gap analysis of what we have now, how it's serving the community, and where we think we have some of the gaps, both in programmatic gaps and funding gaps and other things that we feel that we need to have to help us with this project to be successful. And then as we get towards the end, we'll be more focused on the facilities in meeting 4. Will be this is where we're still, we're a ways out on this meeting, probably summer, and we'll be just talking about the principles and policies, data presented in the meetings that have led up to this, and kind of what we see as gauging and starting to look at things like location and size. And then finally, the last one will just be kind of the wrap up and the kind of a report issued, and we have the option to have a 6th meeting. We talked about this would be a 5 to 6 meeting process. This probably will go most of 2022 on this. This is what we call phase 1 of this project, and that's really the needs assessment, meat and potatoes piece of what we're trying to discern out of this process. So with that, I think I would just I would stop and just say we've created our draft agenda for the first meeting that's a little bit more specific. I didn't want to post that today because we changed it on Friday, and I haven't had a chance to update the document yet. So it just kind of reordered some of the things that you have in your packet, but the basic concepts of that agenda are the same. So with that, I will end and take any questions.
Anybody have any questions for Barry or suggestions for the process? I know a number of us are on the stakeholder advisory committee.
Mike Parker.
Yeah, hi, thanks, Barry, and thanks for covering that for everybody. This is more for good of the order. Are there ways, you've mentioned a little bit about the stakeholder advisory group as kind of a key way to get feedback from the community. Are there other ways for the community to get involved during this process of 2022 if they're not on that stakeholder advisory group?
Well, I think there will be, Mike. I think that's one of the pieces we have coming up later in our agenda is the communication strategy around the task force in general, but also specifically for this project. Jill has written some of those statement of work kind of scope into a document that what we want to get out of our communications efforts for 2022. So that will be another opportunity. We'll be looking for ways to engage the public in potentially town hall style meetings or other things that we can think of that we develop through the development of our communications plan for the project.
Great, thanks, Barry.
Dan, you had your hand up, I think.
Hey, Barry, there's another group that's associated with the stakeholder advisory group. What is the purpose of that group?
Well, there's actually a few groups that are working on it, including the task force, of course. But the other primary group is the technical advisory committee, which is probably, where a lot of the hard data is going to come from corrections, from the prosecutor's office, as we see what kind of direction we're headed. That technical advisory group will be the staff folks on the ground that can help provide the information that we need to assess, the nuts and bolts sides of things. Is that the group you're thinking of, Dan? Is the technical advisory committee?
No, there's so I was asked to be on a group that is advising the SAC, and I'm just trying to understand. I'm just really trying to understand my role, basically, as to what I'm supposed to be doing as a policymaker.
Well, I'm not certain exactly which group you're talking about now, because the only ones that are involved, to my knowledge, are the SAC itself, the Stakeholder Advisory Committee, the task force, and then through the task force, the steering committee, and then the technical advisory committee. So those are the 4 elements to the project.
I think it must be this like a steering committee. I'll go back and look through my emails and let you know.
Yeah, it's kind of easy to get confused because of all the different elements. Trying to replace the consultant we had with some of the expertise on the task force is interesting process, but I think it's going to work really well. Heather.
Good morning. Happy New Year. Heather Flaherty, citizen representative. Councilman Buchanan, can you tell us a little bit about what you picture for phase 2 and how phase 1 might shape that? What comes after this?
Well, phase 2 is more of the, what the springboard we'll get out of phase 1 will be that facility analysis. So when we start getting into phase 2, we'll be looking at more of some of the hard points that are around that, some of the architectural features that we might need, some of the more the professional side of developing an actual facility that we'd be moving into that discussion. And then just while I'm at it, phase 3, which would be the next phase after that, into 2023. Both of those phases would be into 2023. But that final phase is really the financial picture, the agreements we have to have with the city of Bellingham and the other jurisdictions around the county, all those details that last time took quite a while to get through. So we want to make sure we have enough time for that phase 5 to get good, solid financial agreements in place that are going to work for the whole community. So that's kind of the outline of the whole project.
Barry, I have a question for you. Both the criminal legal part of it and the behavioral health part of it are going to rely on data. And we already know that we don't have a lot of the data. So we'll identify those places where we don't. But to eventually get the data, and I hope this is what Dr. Harris will help us with a little bit, it's going to take a while. So I'm wondering how you're thinking about the timing of getting the data that we really want to base a lot of these decisions on together to inform a gap analysis.
That's a great question, and I was thinking about this yesterday. And I think we're absolutely going to have to circle back on the data piece because we're only going to be identifying what we don't know and our gaps and our needs and our understanding of what we do have. But I think it's going to take another round, I think, coming back, and that's why I'm glad that we have kind of that extra meeting on our, in our pocket for a 6th meeting, because I can envision that piece and probably, other elements of the other pieces too that are going to have to be revisited, kind of a review meeting, wrap up strategy. But the data piece is going to be important that we do circle back and clarify any of the questions that arose during, the first round when we're doing the analysis. So I do believe you're absolutely correct. We're going to need to definitely look at that in a finer detail later on once we have a true understanding of the data we do have and don't have.
Thank you. Other questions for Barry? Heather.
This may be a question for another time, and it may not even be an appropriate question for this table. So, Stephen, you can redirect if needed. But we're talking about the facility, right, for our criminal justice and legal needs in the community. And I'm wondering, we've tried this a few times in different ways, and I'm wondering, Barry, if you can share, how do you feel like this process will be different, and what have we learned from the first few tries? And that could be its own roundtable. I know you've been incredibly intentional about that, and I'm curious if you could share anything here.
Sure. Well, I think number one, that we want a much more robust public process. I think the two things that we missed big time on the first two initiatives was that we really did a poor job of engaging the public along the way. And that was, we did that twice without changing much at all, but between the second initiative and the first. So that's one thing. I think the other thing that's important is that we look really more holistically at what our needs are, and that's why hence the behavioral health gap analysis piece, because that's going to be a big part of our thinking. Because we need to think A, for the long term, but also B, for the wide term on what all we can capture with this project, what we can get, what kind of behavioral health needs can we solve along the way by creating this whole say a justice campus, or however you want to think of that. But it does need to be a holistic approach. We need to really understand all of the variables that go into it and try to solve as many of those, I think, as we can.
Dan.
Well, I'm glad you're thinking big picture, Barry. That's really reassuring to hear. I guess just from the city side of things, our police station building is way past its useful life. Our Muni Court, same thing, well past its useful life. We've talked about having a mental health hospital of sorts. Heather Flaherty's brought that up and brought that to the attention of the Behavioral Health Committee. So there's a lot of things in play here. And, like the Eminem song, One Shot, you only get one shot to do this. We're not going to really have another chance, I think. Yeah. I mean, this would be the third try that the community has undertaken. And I'm glad you're bringing up behavioral health. I think that's one of the linchpins here. But I'm just urging the committee to understand the needs of the city of Bellingham as the largest city in the county. But also I see Raylene is her hand went up too. But I do want to shout out too to the other cities and the other cities' needs. We're all in this together. And so how do we manifest what we're talking about here in a meaningful way that's going to benefit the people that are going to be using the system? So I just wanted to bring that up.
That's a great point, Dan. I think that's the whole idea behind this stakeholder advisory committee, is to be able to have representation from, the small cities, the city of Bellingham, and to get those concerns and needs put out on the table.
Raylene?
I agree with Heather on having some concerns, but what I do like is the fact that we're working with communications at this point on what the task force has done in the past, moving forward and combining that with the criminal justice. And I think the other thing that's important on this time around is we're not looking at it as a jail. It's a justice center, criminal justice center, and we're not looking at just to incarcerate, we're also looking at the behavioral health side. And I think that's what the people were complaining about before, is they wanted more assistance for behavioral health. I think the challenge that we're going to have is there's still not enough treatment providers. And so we need to be able to address the need for treatment providers in this area in order for them to make any of this work.
Yes, I agree with you, Raylene. I think the way we need to think of this is a public health and justice center that we're thinking about. So how we integrate, our behavioral health into this is super important.
Arlene. You're muted, Arlene.
Okay. This is very exciting what's happening, and I hope that we will emphasize getting feedback from the users of our system. That was not present much in the last few go-rounds. So when you talk about gaps, you're really talking about who knows what's needed, who knows from their experience. And the people who know what's needed are the people who work in the systems and the people who use the systems, not just the administrators of the systems. So I hope it sounds like we'll be getting much more feedback from those groups and help in our planning system. The greater emphasis on behavioral health issues is monumentally important because everything stems from that kind of care. All prevention, all early intervention is going to come out of a robust behavioral health system, which we haven't had for the last 10 years that I've been trying to see to it that we did. So I'm very hopeful. I think we have really good talent on this, and that makes me believe that we really can do a good job of this.
Thank you, Arlene. Heather.
I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't say just two quick things. One, thank you, Dan, for mentioning the mental health hospital, but all the credit for that idea really goes to Arlene, and I just shepherded some of the details forward. So Arlene, you've been an incredible champion for that from day one. And then Raylene, you mentioned about what happened last time that made people not want to pursue this, and that emphasis on treatment and diversion. And I think, again, I'd be remiss if I didn't say, I think just for clarity's sake, people really wanted to see treatment outside of a facility or a justice involved, really focusing on the diversion and not waiting for somebody to be arrested in order to get services. So I'm excited about this process, so those kinds of community values can come forward and there can be more clarity around what really community wants to see embodied in whatever a justice campus and public health focused campus looks like.
Thank you, Heather. Any other questions for Barry? Dan.
Yeah, I just want to make sure Barry and other thought leaders on this project are going to be looking at payment reimbursement models through the MCOs and through Medicaid. A lot of this is really outside of criminal justice, and it's really in the healthcare world. I just want to make sure. I had a discussion with Maura Christensen last week, and it really became very apparent to me that so much of the challenge is based in how providers are or are not reimbursed and can navigate those systems. And so I just want to make sure that we have eyes wide open and forward thinking on the financial part of it, which seems to be at the crux of either making things go or making things not happen. So I just want to throw that out there.
Arlene?
I just wanted to respond to what Dan is saying. Serving on the North Sound Behavioral Health ASO, that's where I began to see how the financing goes. And it's the healthcare authority at the top where the state funding comes from. Then there's they finance the MCOs. So if we have to get to the top to get to the MCOs, and we have to pressure the MCOs to take responsibility for the services that are needed. It is starting to happen now. It's beginning to happen with some new programs for navigation individuals for drug treatment. It's the beginning.
Barry, would you give your thoughts on Dan's and Arlene's comments? Because one of the unique values to me of the task force is that a diverse group of people interested in this have really burrowed down into details like the Medicaid payment system. On the one hand, that seems like a critical piece to include in making a public health and safety initiative succeed. On the other hand, I could say it seems a little bit beyond the scope of the Justice Project itself and getting a ballot initiative out there. So where does a critical piece like Dan and Arlene just identified factor into your planning process as you see it from the council perspective?
Well, I would say just from off the top of my head, I would look at the beginning part of phase 3, which is the financial side of things, is when we'll have the most detailed function or focus on that particular issue. But I do believe in phase 1, we do need to identify the players that are involved that we need to be that we know needs to be at the table for the financing piece when it does come up. So I think during our second meeting, I think that our third meeting, which is the behavioral health meeting, that's got to be something that's considered at that meeting as well. So I think we'd take 2 bites at that. We would kind of get an overview bite early, and then we would have a more specific when we can really delve into the details around, how we navigate those waters. So I think we have a couple opportunities to approach that, but we want to make sure that we have all that well in place by the second quarter of 2023. We have to have all that figured out. Actually, first quarter is when we really need to have it figured out. So,
Arlene.
Do you think that we could engage Joe Valentine, the executive director of the North Sound Behavioral Health Board, early on in this process to let him know, or maybe he does already know? I don't know if he does, but he would be a real key individual.
okay. I'm jotting that down.
Perry.
Good morning, Perry Maury, Human Services Supervisor. Yes, I think that's a great idea, Arlene, and just Barry, I will also made a note, and I'm in fairly consistent contact with Joe, and we'll just apprise him generally, maybe prior to you talking to him specifically. So I just wanted to offer that support.
Okay, thanks, Perry.
One more call for questions. Okay. Thank you, Barry.
Thanks, everybody. I appreciate you being here this morning.
Thanks for catching us up, Barry, and thanks for leading this effort. Really important. Jack, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Steve. Well, that's ironic. Now, Barry, don't turn off your camera because we're going to steering committee.
Okay, so all I have to say about that is the 2 items that we spent the most time on last week were this item that we just covered and the one that's upcoming that Jill will be covering, which is the look at our communication strategy. So that's really all I would have to report out of steering, unless Jack and Steven, you have anything you'd like to add?
The one thing I would add is, and Jack, rein me in if you'd like to comment on this instead. This might be an appropriate point to remind everybody that we are losing 2 of our original members with this meeting. Moonwater and Byron Mannering have been with this task force from the beginning. Incredibly valuable perspectives that have really broadened the scope of what we can see and think about. And so I want to acknowledge their service. And in addition, that was a lead into part of a conversation we had at the steering committee about the deadline for applications, which originally had been last Tuesday, I guess. So Barry, you made some changes in the council, I think, that we talked about, and maybe you could fill us in on.
Yeah, we extended the deadline, or that. Yeah, I'm not sure of the deadline. Jill will be able to help me out on that, but we extended the date at which the council would wish to appoint those positions to the second meeting in January, which is I believe the 25th. Yeah, 25th. So the due date is somewhere in advance of that, and I think Jill probably has that exact date.
Yes, the due date for applications will be, or is 10 a.m. this next Tuesday, January 18th.
Okay. Moonwater, I was going to call on you, actually, you and Byron both, to see if there was something you'd like to say. So as Stephen pointed out, you have been here from the beginning, and I just wanted to create that space if there was something you wanted to say to the task force, as well as let me echo Stephen's thanks. Go right ahead.
Thank you. I did not prepare any remarks for this morning, but just while it's top of mind, I just want to suggest I'm thinking about different avenues for promoting that opportunity, because I'm finding, taking initiative to go onto the county's website to search for available openings on various task force is not a common practice. So I would just, if there's opportunity in the next couple of days to think about the folks who can disseminate those kinds of opportunities fairly rapidly and widespread, I would encourage people right now to brainstorm who are those hubs of communication to various community members. Thinking about the nonprofit world, places like the Community Foundation, the Chuckanut Health Foundation, United Way, often send out regular e-blasts to the nonprofit community at large. I'd strongly encourage connecting with those folks and just sending out some type of e-blast about this particular opportunity, given the cross-disciplinary focus of this community this task force that are those conduits, I think, would be wise and helpful partners in spreading the word in a fairly rapid period of time. And I'll keep brainstorming about other opportunities and just sort of nudge everyone else to do the same. So hopefully some strong applications will come in. And then I'll say in this moment, I actually can't believe it's been 8 years. And I'm so thrilled and impressed with the steady perseverance and amazing accomplishments that our community has undertaken through the collaborative efforts happening on so many different levels. So I think my words this morning are just filled with deep appreciation, kudos, and acknowledgement to each of you and the community members who are stepping up, bringing their voice to the tables, making space at various tables, staying creative, making things happen. We live in a remarkable community, and I am so proud to be a member of the Whatcom County community that has task forces of this nature, that has so many different creative programming and services to support our community to be resilient and healthy. So deep appreciation. The work is in such fantastic hands. It's been an honor to be a part of it for this period of time. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much, Moonwater. It's been a pleasure working with you. Byron.
Good morning, everybody. I just wanted to echo what Moonwater was saying about how impressed I am with the task force. 8 years, yeah, it's crazy to think about. And I've been on a lot of task force in this community, and I would say that this one has had the most focused and the most enduring attention to strategies to resolve certain situations in this area that's really difficult and has accomplished so much. So kudos to the task force, who I know, members have put in so many more hours and so much more dedication to this than I have. That the strength of it really has come from all of you. So I just appreciate your efforts and encourage your continued, focus in this area. And, in terms of recruiting new people, I think, finding good people, I've made a recommendation for one, and I'm sure others are as well. So hopefully somebody else will come in, but no matter who's coming in, I think that the task force is in really good hands and our community is in really good hands. So thank you all to you for including me in the process, and look forward to seeing the achievements in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Byron. And again, it's been a pleasure. We've come a long ways from those first early meetings for sure. All right, I think next on the agenda, is there any more questions for the steering committee? All right, seeing none, the next thing on the agenda would be a report from the Joint Behavioral Health and Justice Systems Committees. And I'm not 100% sure who's doing that, but I'm trusting that the chairs of those committees can accomplish that.
Dan, do you want to start?
I'll vote for Raylene.
I see. Thank you. I think we had a pretty productive joint task force meeting. I mean, we still have a lot of work to do on the discussions. We talked about the vacant behavioral health specialist, and I'm hoping they were hoping to have somebody hired by the 1st. So I'm hoping we're moving forward on that, because that's definitely going to be assistance for navigation and reentry purposes. Talked about current use on the Crisis Stabilization Center, and I know that Chief Tanksley briefly spoke about the tour that he had, and that was very beneficial. And then we talked to some individuals from DSHS, Darla Dawson and Tom Kinlan. And then I also had a couple of local defense counsel. They didn't speak as much, but they learned a lot. So they were very appreciative to be participants in this. Talked about competency evaluations and restorations. COVID isn't just hurting us at the jails. It's actually having a pretty good impact on restoration and Western State. They can only bring so many people in. And then if they have somebody that has COVID, then they have to wait. And so we see the backlog on the jails, and then they also have a backlog there. But it did seem like it was a positive interaction, and that they're on track with kind of the same ideas that we are with diversion programs, and want to work with us, want to assist us in trying to make this better. The True Blood decision that we've talked about before in the past allows the individuals to get the evaluations in the jail pretty quickly, but out of custody is a little bit more of a challenge. And sometimes those out of custody evaluations and restoration end up in the jail because of more charges while they're waiting that competency evaluation. So this reentry and competency and restoration is going to be an ongoing discussion and topic for both behavioral health and legal and justice. And then we'll come back together on the next joint meeting and see where we're at on making things better for everybody. Is there questions, or am I missing anything? Dan, Arlene, Mike, anybody?
I think you covered it pretty well. And I agree, this is a big body of work to go through, to understand and to try to make recommendations based on the things that we're finding out. Reentry for this community for a long time did not really have effective leadership in terms of reducing recidivism and reentry into the jail. And I think that it's a gap in services that we currently face. I mean, I'll be quite candid here. I have grave considerations around ITA and gravely disabled definitions. I think that people are people who could benefit from an intervention because of this country's longstanding commitment to civil liberties may end up being in grave harm. And it may have nothing to do with criminogenic behavior. It may just have to do with that the person has a behavioral health issue up to and including mental health or substance use disorder. So I'm really concerned that our state representatives may not take up the mantle of leadership when it comes to improving those conditions. I just don't know if that's going to be the case. So again, there's a lot of work to be done here, and we're in that discovery phase right now, as the lawyers will put it. Stephen can appreciate that term. And I'm discovering that we have a considerable amount of hurdles to overcome, and some of them are beyond local control. And it's going to take the working with state leadership and federal leadership to work through some of these issues. So that's all I have to add.
Are there any questions for anybody on this topic?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the report. And of course, there are minutes available as well, I think, from that meeting if people want to review that. Let me refer back to my agenda quickly. All right, we are at update from jurisdiction. Stephen, do you want to take this? And I'm not sure if jurisdictions are prepared to do this or this is informal today.
Well, I think it's informal, unless Jill tells me she nudged people ahead of time. But it has been a while since we've gotten updates from the status of operations in different corners of the system. So informal though it might be, I'd like to call on a couple people just if they have anything to say to bring us up to speed on how things are functioning. And I think after a pretty tumultuous year, maybe if I could call on Darlene first, talk about Bellingham Municipal Court, since so much good work was going on there earlier on.
Hi, Stephen. This is Darlene Peterson. What would you like to know, Stephen?
Just a survey of sort of the activity levels, issues you're finding, problems that have arisen in still COVID times.
One of the things that has been very difficult has been moving cases through the system. We have many pretrial people that are on alcohol monitoring bracelets. And with COVID, it's been very hard to get them through the system. So what we've seen is that they are staying on those alcohol monitoring bracelets a lot longer than they would be if we were able to do normal procedures. We have seen a real drop in cases. We generally have 70 to 80% of our cases that involve indigent defendants. And usually before COVID hit, we were getting close to 2,500 of those cases a year. With COVID, it's dropped in half. And so we're not seeing the charges and arrests that we were. That is all slowed down. So our GPS use has gone down quite a bit. Other than that, I know Superior Court and District Court have just suspended trials again because of Omicron. And Judge Lev has determined she will be doing the same. And we just started them back in January. So it's very disappointing to have to do that. But Superior Court and District Court are suspending them at this point until February 14th. And so every time we have to do that, that slows down cases going through the system. We also have a backlog of warrants that were authorized but not issued. And what that means is there are a lot of cases where people failed to appear for hearings or they had violations of what they were supposed to be doing, and a warrant was authorized, but it was not issued due to the Supreme Court ruling that unless it's a community safety or urgent issue, you cannot order the warrant. So we have probably right now about 800 of those warrants on hold. If anybody calls us, we've been doing quash warrants, so we can get rid of some of them if people will call us and we can take care of them that way. But we still have a backlog of quite a few. Other than that, we just have a new commissioner that's been hired by Bellingham Municipal Court. And we are holding hearings currently, both morning and afternoon. So we're moving forward. We're just not able to resolve cases. So that's kind of where we are at this point.
Thank you, Darlene. That was great. Useful information. Bruce, can I invite you to fill us in on the status of district court, please?
Yeah. Sorry about that. Yeah, good morning, everybody. A lot of similarities to our
Bruce, oh, there you go. You're coming back. There you are.
sorry, I picked the exact wrong moment to miss swallow, I guess. A very similar report in what's happening in district court as is what's happening in Bellingham. We were able to actively run jury trials. I don't know, must have been for about 6 or 7 weeks. We had 1 to 2 trials a week during that period. I think 1 week we may have had 3. And we've got our protocols down for the jury check-in and the orientation, and which is operated out of district court. That process seems to be working very smoothly. We're able to keep people socially distanced and be able to keep the jurors safe. We have had pretty much every time we've called in a pool of jurors, we have had somebody show up with symptoms that we have had to turn away. In terms of the juries, that's kind of the summary of what's going on. We have also suspended trials until at least I think it's the 14th of February. And I think the judges here will just assess that as we get closer and see what they want to do there. In terms of the operation of the court, it's very similar with Darlene's. It's very similar with all of the courts. We're getting a backlog of cases. It's easier, actually. The whole system works well, in my perspective. The whole system works better when we actually run jury trials. We don't get these backlogs, and from the court's perspective, in terms of staff resources, it's more work for us to not have a jury trial than it is to have a jury trial. Because every time we suspend these jury trials, we have to start rescheduling all of these cases. And we've become more efficient at it because we've done it over and over and over again over the period of the pandemic. But it creates more work for us to not have a jury trial than it would just to hold the trial, or at least even if the trial doesn't go, the case resolves one way or another in another format or fashion. But anyway, that's kind of the update there. With probation, we've got our routines down with this. We've got Zoom appointments that we can have. We've got telephonic appointments. We see people at our front desk. We're doing urinalysis testing and breath testing as we always have. We've got protocols in place for social distancing. And the one thing that we aren't doing is we're not bringing any members of the public to the secure area of the office where the PO offices are. So we're meeting with people. We can meet with them out in the courthouses, that out in the county. We can meet with them in courtrooms and hallways. We can meet them at our front desk. But we're particularly with this most recent round with the pandemic, I'm still not comfortable bringing members of the public back into the secure areas of the office. And we don't do that with either department, but it hasn't slowed us down. It hasn't gotten in the way of our ability to supervise. We're taking advantage of all the tools that we have. It's very different. It looks different. It feels a little bit different, but I think the bottom line is that the end result, that what we're getting in terms of our ability to effectively supervise, is the same as it was before the pandemic. So that's kind of what I got.
Thank you, Bruce. Dave Reynolds, is there anything you want to add from the Superior Court perspective?
No, just similar to what Darlene and Bruce have indicated.
Great, thank you. And Raylene, from another perspective of municipal court.
Thank you, Stephen. You know, a lot of it's echoing the same thing. I do notice we had our warrants go down when the Thurston County decision came out with date of the last thirds. We cleared out a lot of those warrants, but then they increased because of COVID, because a lot of people know that there's booking restrictions and that people aren't going to jail. So on misdemeanor charges, so we end up with these people not showing up for court, and our warrants have actually gone up higher than they were prior to the Thurston County decision. So it doesn't seem like things are moving as well as we'd like to due to COVID. We are doing more Zoom meetings for individuals, and we're getting more efficient, as they said, with scheduling and with electronic meetings and DocuSign and different areas of technology are becoming more beneficial, which may still be used after COVID. So we have more equal access to justice. I think that's a positive from all of this, is that we're learning how to use different tools. But all in all, I want the pandemic to go away, and I want trials to start.
Thank you, Raylene. Let me shift over into the law enforcement end of the system. Caleb, again, not expecting preparation in here, but can you fill us in with the status of things in the sheriff's office?
Yeah, I mean, like everything else, the not having trials has been especially problematic for jail populations and staff. As we all know, we have people that we have to book in, and then there's no way for them to get out if we're not having trials or other resolutions to cases. So that puts us sort of in the middle of a pinch point. And it's been very, very difficult for our staff to manage the populations, especially as we've had more than 5 significant outbreaks of COVID in the facility that ultimately have bled over into staff. And it's been very, very challenging from that aspect. As with all of the other agencies and departments, we're doing our very best to stay engaged, and we have no option but to do our jobs, but it becomes very difficult when we're, you know, reduced by 1/6 of our staff to 1/3 of our staff at a time due to outbreaks. So it's been very challenging. There are a lot of, I feel like we're fielding a lot of frustration from the community when people are, you know, arrested and they can't come to jail for one reason or another, but it's simply because we don't have the space for them. We encounter a lot of people who are encountering difficulties in the community, and it oftentimes the jail is one of the only places that can't say no to people. So it's challenging when we have to say no and say we can't fit anybody in. And so that's been really difficult over the last few months. I'm with Raylene. I want the pandemic to be over. So if we vote for that, that would be great. That's about what I know off the top of my head.
Just a quick follow-up question, Caleb. I think the last we heard, the jail population had gone up a bit from where it had been in the early stages of the pandemic, and certainly the behavioral health acuity level had gone up. Is that still the status of the population?
Yeah, again, as we've seen trials put off and even other informal resolutions to cases not being sort of resolved, we have had, like, again, that pinch point comes into play, and we've ended up with a lot of people who are in custody, very, very serious charges, a lot of people who have difficult to difficulty in the behavioral health components. So it's all very intermingled. But yeah, we definitely have had an increased jail population over the last 6 months, say, as we have not been able to adequately get people released.
Okay, thank you. Chief Tank, anything from the small cities law enforcement perspective you can add?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're sort of muffled.
All right, well, I'm having a little technical difficulties here. But
That's better,
hopefully-
actually.
All right, so essentially from the small cities, we don't have anything new that's going on. However, the HCA has the Substance Use Recovery Services Advisory Committee, which is a committee under the Blake Decision 5476. And that committee has had 2 meetings already on the state level. I am the representative for WASPIC, which is the Washington Association of Sheriffs and Chiefs of Police. So we've had 2 meetings. There's another meeting in February. There's some homework I have to do with regard to the barriers to services here in Washington County, which they asked me last meeting. So I'm gonna need to reach out to some people to talk about the barriers of service here in our part of town. And I say town, I mean the entire Washington County. So if some folks see an email from me, just asking about barriers to services, that's what it's all about.
Thank you, Chief. And we really appreciate your serving on that Blake implementation committee. That's going to be really important work, obviously. Looks like I lost Chief Simon in there. Prosecutor Ritchie, is there anything you can report out of your office status update?
Sure, I can tell you quite a bit. First off, our employees are out pretty regularly right now with COVID. That seems to be hitting our community pretty hard. I don't know if you've seen today's hospital stats, but they're at 58, which is the highest we've seen in a long time. In fact, I think it's the highest ever. Previous high was 47. So yeah, it's hitting us just as hard as anyone else. Caseloads are high. Our felony prosecutors are holding 200 cases at a time. Part of that's due to COVID. Excuse me just a second, not right now. Sorry, got a lot of things going on. We're working hard here, even though you know, things are going on with COVID and trials are shut down. Trials shutting down is a big reason why our caseloads are as high as they are. We have approximately 200 cases per felony attorney, and we should only have about 100. Our district court attorneys are holding about 200 cases as well, and that's kind of a normal number, really. You know, we started trials and we were getting resolutions starting to take a hold of the backload, but it's or the backlog, but it's you know, that was short-lived, and we're back to trials being shut down. During the while trials were open, we did have some trials, not as many as most would think, but we were resolving cases, and that's what usually happens when trials are going on. You know, I heard somebody mention that fewer cases were coming in, and I don't see that. From my understanding of the statistics, cases are still coming in at a high rate. Property crime is up significantly. Homicide and assaults are up. Sexual assaults and domestic violence is down. I don't know if y'all remember this, but when COVID started, people were predicting that we would see fewer domestic violence cases and sexual assaults reported. I think that's being borne out. I think that's actually happening based on the stats I've seen recently for what's coming into our office. I don't know. It's been a long haul of some you know, difficult things going on, and I, like others, am hopeful that this pandemic will end soon. That's about all I have.
Thanks, Eric. That was excellent. Raylene.
Thank you. Real quick, I forgot to mention that I know Blaine has started using Axon, which is the body cams, and the other small cities are hopping on board to meet new requirements. And so that's a new system that's going to be able to download the videos and get them off to the county prosecutors and the courts as needed. I'm kind of excited to see how this works, because I know when there was Coban that we used, which was the car video or car cams, some of the cases were resolved quicker because things were on video, and they were able to see what they were able to work with. So prosecution and defense would have quicker resolutions than having to take everything to trial. I don't know if that's going to be the case with this. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of hiccups, and it's going to be expensive when it comes to records and redaction and all of that, because it was an unfunded mandate. But it'll be definitely something to watch as we move forward to see how things pan out. I'm sure Chief Tank and Chief Simon would be able to chime in on future on the body cams and how it's working for the smaller agencies.
Thank you, Raylene. Lastly, I'll just invite you, Mike Hilly, to give us an update on how things are looking out in the EMS field and interactions with some of the on-the-ground intervention work.
Yeah, thanks. Good morning. Actually in the last week, we're seeing a good bit of tension just related to the COVID uptick, mostly in transportation areas. I'm getting word this morning they're going to set up another isolation quarantine facility over Civic Field to catch the overflow, and some emails that are coming across this morning about the surge at the hospital. So our workforce is pretty healthy now. I do know that we've had some key people that were some extended COVID quarantines and sick from it. We do know that most all of our crews are vaccinated out there, but I know some of the fire departments are still kind of navigating that with their part-time volunteer groups. And then also with the recent floods and the cold weather snap, et cetera. Yes, this really pushed the limits on some of the EMT providers out there. But I would say generally we're still in a healthy mode, but we're right on that edge, where hopefully we'll get some relief soon, to take that edge off. But yeah, we're running at high RPM right now in the EMS system, and it's showing. It's definitely showing. And if there's any specific questions, absolutely, I'd be glad to kind of dive into that.
Any questions for Mike? Thank you, Mike.
You bet.
I think I caught everybody. So Jack, you want to take us on to the next item?
Sure, and that was, thank you, Stephen. That was great. I hope everybody found that useful. And I think you asked, but I'll be sure, is there anybody else on the call that wanted to add anything to that kind of overview of where we're at in Whatcom County? All right, well, thanks everyone for letting Stephen be a professor and call on you unprepared. You did that adroitly. All right, the last topic is the update on our communication consultant. And Jill, I think that is something you're going to be doing.
Yes, good morning, everyone. This is just a quick update to let you know that a request for proposals for a communications consultant is developed, and you can find that in your meeting packet for today. The next step with that, I'll be working with the county's finance department to finalize the RFP and get that distributed out. If any of you have suggestions for any firms to include on the RFP distribution list, please let me know. You can email me. That information would be great. The next steps regarding the communications consultant then is to narrow down the list of potential communications campaign topics. I have 2 pages worth of suggestions. We need to narrow that down to 3 or 4. So those are my next steps. And that's all I have.
All right. Are there any questions for Jill on that topic? All right, the next item on the agenda is other business. I don't believe Stephen and I are aware of any, but is there any other business we should be aware of? All right. Jill, I'm going to move to public comment, and I see 4 people in the participants area. And if you could please do your invitation for public comment that you do so well.
Yes, thank you. We have 4 people in our attendee list right now. If any of you would like to speak to the task force, please virtually raise your hand now. No hands are raised.
All right. Seeing none, the public comment is closed. And I believe we're going to adjourn. Is there any reason not to adjourn, Stephen, that you're aware of? I know it's 10:07, but I think we're done.
I don't think so. Just a final farewell to Moonwater and Byron. Encouragement to reach out, as Moonwater was saying, to look for new applicants. Reminder to keep our GARE commitments in mind as we look for people who might diversify the membership of the task force. And that's all I have, Jack.
Okay, I do see Mike Parker had his hand up, so I'm going to call Mike.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mike.
Actually, Stephen covered it. I just wanted to do a rousing send off and thank you to both Moonwater and Byron for their years of service. Thank you all so much.
Perfect. All right, so with
Happy
that,
New Year. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
bye-bye, and we are adjourned.